What's up, everybody? This is Just Blaze. You know me for a lot of things: production, engineering, DJing, all-around nice guy and shrewd businessman. But today we're going to discuss something a little bit different that I don't talk about too often, and that's fatherhood. The idea of having presents over giving presents. Stay tuned.
Sitting down with a friend, a good fella, a return guest. You hear that? That's
It's the sound of fatherhood above us.
That's the sound. Internet's my friend Just Blaze is back in the building.
What's up, brother?
Man, listen, it's hard to get in touch with you, man. You know, now that not only you've always been a busy guy.
Yeah, but it's been a lot crazier lately. Between really just going hard in the studio again, getting off the road, running a few businesses, and the most important business of all, which is being a dad. It's been a lot lately.
Welcome to the club of being a dad.
Thank you for having me. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
You know, it's funny, too, because I tell people this all the time. When you become a father, it actually puts fire in your eyes, gives you more meaning to what you're doing.
Oh, definitely.
Like, did you remember that moment when that exactly happened? Like, not saying you're a hustler. You've always been hustling.
I've always hustled and I've always found a way, but the hustle is different now. I mean, I'm fortunate that from very early on in my career, I had some good people around me in terms of making sure I thought about long-term goals, because, you know, I was making so much money.
Sure.
At such a young age, and many people in my situation will just, you know, they blow it on.
A watch.
Yeah, you know, cars, jewelry, unnecessary things, you know, fast women, fast life in general. I bought a few nice things, but I never really dumbed out, and that's the only reason why I'm able to be sitting in a place like we're sitting right now, physically, and also just being in the place that I'm in mentally. You know, I've always had investments. I've always had IRAs. You know, when you work for yourself as an artist or a producer, you know, you don't have a pension.
Sure, that's your 401k.
Exactly.
You're creating your own.
I'm making my own. You know what I mean? So,
but who? But you're saying people taught you that? Like, you know, there was people actually lending you that advice growing up?
Not growing up, but more so like once I started coming into money. You know, I mean, I kind of was, you know, don't get me wrong, I had a good head on my shoulders, but then also, you know, my old manager, Nasa, she was, you know, really good about trying to keep money in check. And then one of my old neighbors, when I used to live in the city, when I first had my first apartment in the city, was at the time a junior financial advisor for Morgan Stanley. So at the time he was dealing with accounts that were worth $500,000 and up.
Damn.
I maybe had like $60,000, you know, in my pocket, but I think he just saw the promise of you know, of the future for me. So, you know, he kind of made the exception, you know, took the little bit of money that we had and made it work for us, and kind of first got us on the path to securing stuff for the future, along with a great accountant. And so going back to what you were asking me about fatherhood, I already had that mentality and that mindset. However, your long-term goals become intensified. They change.
Sure.
Because at this, you know, from that moment that it really hits you, you know, you realize you're not just doing this for yourself anymore. You know, you're essentially just doing it for the child.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You know, every generation is supposed to get better. And you know, when I trace the steps back, that's definitely the trend. You know, as I think back through my family tree, you know, each generation did better, and I'm fortunate enough to be I'm fortunate enough at this point in my life to be able to now carry on and make a better way for my next generation. You know what I mean?
I remember you speaking about your father, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember him. Was he always there? I don't remember. Like,
my parents split when I was 10, if I'm not mistaken. Never actually got divorced because divorce is expensive.
Yeah. It was easy to just to leave.
Yeah. So when my pops passed, like, my mom's was still legally his wife and still had to be the one to go to the apartment and
Sure.
or to the condo rather, and clear, you know, the townhouse, and clear stuff out and whatnot, and deal with a lot of the legal ramifications of his passing. It was when they first split, he would come around. He was still, you know, come around on the weekends and whatnot, and then he went through I remember one day that he said he was coming, that he was on his way to get us for the weekend, and he never showed up. And then we just didn't see him or hear from him for a while. And then I remember Christmas, I think of that year, either that year or the following year, he just popped up and hung out the whole day, and then he came back the next day. And I remember, I want to say this was the Christmas that Genesis came out, so I must have been 12.
Oh, Phil Collins?
No, Sega Genesis.
Oh, Sega Genesis.
Because I remember what I got for Christmas that year.
Altered Beast was in the building?
Yeah, the Altered Beast joint. So I bring that up because I remember what I got for Christmas, and I remember sitting there playing the game, and he's sitting there watching me and my brother play, and it just started coming out of him. He just started telling us, well, he started out by apologizing for
not being there,
for not being around for the past while. But then he had explained, and my brother was too young to understand this at the time. I was barely old enough to understand it at the time. But he broke down crying, and he was explaining to me, I think my brother might have left the room, or maybe he waited until my brother left the room. But he had told me, I'm sorry for being gone. I got nervous, I got scared, and I kind of ran away for a bit, and I wanted to come back, but I didn't know how, so I just stayed away because it was easier. And at the time, I understood the words.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily understand the mentality at that time, or what they really represented long term. And it really, I think, it wasn't until adulthood that I really understood what he was saying.
Did you ever, of course, did you ever look, did that, you ever take the moment to think, like, did that ever affect you? Like,
I used to think it didn't. And then I remember sometime in my mid-20s, I was going through a tough time personally. And it was the first time that I actually said to myself, I wish my dad was here so I could talk to him about this. And I think it was because I was going through a rough time personally, in my personal life, and it made me look at the issues that my mom and dad had in a different light. Because now you're going through your own issues, and it's not to say that I didn't, I didn't look at either one of them personally different, but now I'm looking at relationships from a different perspective.
Of course.
So now that I'm going through things that I'm going through, I kind of wish that my dad was around so I could talk to him about it, whether or not he was right or wrong, but just from a man's perspective.
Of course. It's crazy too, because as a fellow father, there's no manual. There's no booklet.
Not at all.
My daughter's 19. My son's 4, and I still have like parenting anxiety,
Right.
and just to make sure that every night, like, did I do the best I could do? I was a separated dad with my daughter. Did I make sure everything was okay? So the point I'm making is to you, not growing up with a dad,
right?
Like, what do you know about being, like, say, a father? Because you're not saying you're winging it, but you're really like.
Well, see, the thing is, regardless, we're all winging it.
Of course.
And I think that's the important thing to remember. Like, I didn't grow up with my dad completely absent, but there, like I said, there was that stretch where he just wasn't around at all. And then I kind of made it. It was off and on for a while that I kind of made it my business at one point to reach out to him and really maintain the relationship up until he passed. Because, like I said, I never forgot that day. When he told me that he wanted to come back around, he just didn't know how.
Sure.
And but even with my friends who grew up, with both their parents and whatnot, they have certain examples, but when they have kids of their own, they're still just really trying to figure it out. You know why?
Sure.
Because every family is different, every kid is different, every parent to child relationship is different. You could look at two kids who grew up in the same household with the same upbringing, and the kids are completely different. It's interesting when I look at me and my siblings, as different as we may be, we kind of all ended up the same way in terms of our mannerisms, our speech, our values, and I think that's bigger than just the fact of or bigger than just our parents. I think it's just because we grew up with a strong family unit in general, even outside of mom and dad. aunts, uncles, great aunts, great
Getting
uncles
together, right? You know,
yeah, grandparents, I was fortunate enough to have my great grandparents into my 30s. You know what I mean? So our family was very tight knit, and we all, we had our issues, but what family doesn't? But I have other friends that I've grown up with, same mom, same dad, same household all their lives, and one is like, the straight A student going to Harvard or some just doing well for themselves. And then you have another one who's just out in the street.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Addicted to drugs or
or
can't get right.
Yeah, or just in different places, and they're in polar opposite places of their lives. And that's when you really realize there is no manual, because every experience is going to be different. Every relationship with each child is going to be different.
Sure.
So you kind of just, as much as you think once you get there, you realize you don't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you what you do know. It's crazy that you say that, too, because what you do know, though, is that kids, the innocence, once the innocence is gone, then you start saying to yourself, like a kid, like my son will walk over to me and be like, he did something wrong. I'm like, what's the matter? Why would you do that? And they're like, you're my best friend. And I'm like, all right, man, whatever, give me a hug,
Right.
Now, when they get older,
right.
It's like, like my daughter, or, I haven't had a son that old yet, but
right.
like my daughter, but it's like, you learn, like, all right, it's a little bit different. And I learned that there's levels of parenting, right? So there's levels, like right now, like, our kids are almost the same age, where it's like, they want to eat, you hang out with them, they get tired, maybe they take a nap whatever.
Right.
When they get older, then, it's like
the routine changes.
Yeah. Things change, and then they don't want to hang out all the time, or maybe they're busy, depending what type of, relationship you're in. And
on top of that, they're just, they become people in their own rights. Like, it's funny, even just watching Solomon from the time he was 6 months to 19 months, like, he has a personality now. He has things that he likes, things that he doesn't like, things that he doesn't like. Things he wants to do, things he doesn't want to do. He has his own jokes. You know what I mean? Like, we'll play like a shape matching game.
Yeah.
And I know that he knows which shape goes in which part of the puzzle, but he purposely will, like, sit there and tease me. Like, he'll have the circle in his hand, and he'll go to put it right above the square and be like, he, because he knows it's not supposed to go there. You know what I mean? And that's the beginnings of him developing as a person, as a personality, and developing a personality. And by the time they get to be 16, 15, 14, I remember when I was 14, like, I knew what I liked, I knew what I didn't like. I had my own agendas, you know what I mean? And I think that that's something that also no amount of parenting education or nothing can prepare you for that. You know what I mean? Because you go from having this kid who's you were their entire world, to all of a sudden it's like, no, mom, I don't, or no, dad, I don't want you to drop me off at the mall.
I'm gonna take an Uber.
Yeah, exactly. Back then it was like, I'm gonna take the bus.
Yeah.
Now it's I'm gonna take an Uber.
A lot of people may know you, especially people watching this for the first time or listening to this. They may know you as, and we got to give the hats off. We can't, as a legendary producer.
Thank you.
No, I mean, it's not something I'm fucking saying. I mean, look at the catalog.
Well, thank you guys.
No, but I'm saying
thank anybody who thinks I might be legendary.
Check the catalog, okay? But more importantly, a lot of people may not even know you as a father.
Right.
And I'm sure it's you're sacred of how you push things out. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want everybody to know everything, but do you, again,
not everything's for public consumption,
of course.
And I have mixed feelings about it. Like, my son has an Instagram account.
Yep.
But it's not something
crushing it.
Yeah, but it's not something that I really put on full blast.
Yeah, of course.
It's it's more so for friends and family to see. And
give him, who knows, maybe.
Shoot, he might. He can have a modeling career.
Yeah.
I actually, it's funny, when I first made the account, somebody did reach out from an agency. Just trying to see if that was something that I was interested in. But it's
a lot of work, man.
Yeah,
I did that with Tristan early in the. When my son was early on, and they were like, can you be in the city in 10 minutes? And I'm like, oh man, I can't get there in 10 minutes.
10 hours away.
Well, not only that too, but they wouldn't let you know. It's funny. Even speaking of Nat Robinson, his son Lincoln got an ad with the Gap,
right?
And it's beautiful. It was in stores and everything, but they didn't let him know until the morning of each time. So it's tough. Like modeling for your kids.
My schedule doesn't allow for that. Just the way my family think, the way things are run, it's just that wouldn't work. Because that's a full-time job, like being
Sure.
a mom manager or a dad manager.
Yeah.
You know, that's a full-time gig. And you got auditions all day, and you know, I kind of, like I said, while I wouldn't necessarily totally X that out or scoff at it, there's also something to be said for letting your kid just be a kid.
Sure.
Which is why when I got that first call, I didn't really jump on it. You know, maybe when he's a little bit older and can say this is something I want to do, then cool. You know, for now it's just like let him be a kid.
Sure, there'll be plenty more. You know, actually, here's a funny one. I remember when my son, I went up for an NFL. It was for NFL Sunday Night Football,
Right.
And I had no idea. That's all they told you. And we literally, you know, got him all like gave him a nap and got him all
Right.
like we you know made sure he was like.
And then he had a meltdown when he got there.
No,
anyway?
check this out. And then they asked for him to cry. That's what they wanted. And I'm like, wait. I would have never like gave him his bottle a second ago. I would have delayed it. I wouldn't have did all these extra things. And literally, we were like, nah, we're not with that. And there were people there like at this time, like, eh, you know, like, and then he was like, ah, and I was like, nah, man, I'm not doing that.
That's traumatizing.
Yeah, I was like, nah, I'm not trying to make him cry because.
Nah.
Yeah, I'm so.
I mean, maybe for $1 million.
I mean, no, that's what I'm saying. The money's not a lot. It's more of the opportunity.
It's the opportunity and
we
exposure.
did something with Toys R Us. It was like kind of like Babies R Us. We got like $300 or I think $300 or $400, and the ad was like in a circular.
Yeah. See, now you know what
Yeah.
that part of it, because of the type of business that I'm in, because I deal with advertising, because I'm a businessman in general, I probably wouldn't allow that to happen. Like I don't think I could subject my son to that kind of schedule and intensity for that little amount of money, because I know that what he's advertising generates way too much money. So it's like, this is going to be a Gap ad and you know, all over the internet and billboards and whatnot, and the kid gets $300.
Yeah,
I mean,
or even
$1,000,
even $2,000.
And that's the thing is, I know how the modeling world works. You know, it's just like any other, you know, form of entertainment. You know, you work for nothing until you're really somebody. Then you can write your own price. You know, write your own, you know, your own invoice, your own price tag. But that would kill me to know that my son is doing advertising for a multi-billion-dollar brand or $1 billion brand. You know,
and you got 500.
Yeah, it just, I you know, I couldn't do it.
For
I'd rather just let him hang out in the park.
Take us through the moment when you first knew you were going to become a father.
You know, you had asked me earlier about, you know, off camera about, you know, knowing when it was going to happen or when it was going to go down and how it felt. I didn't have the opportunity to prepare. You know, most times, you know, or not most, but I should say many times, you know, you have a due date.
Sure.
And, you know, you're mentally prepared and blah, blah, blah. You know, in Solomon's case, it wasn't that. It was about maybe, the due date was maybe 2.5 weeks away. Went for, you know, just the usual checkup. You know, we're older, so at our age, you know, 40 and up, you know, or even younger than that, you're considered high risk.
Sure, absolutely.
So you have to go to the doctors more often.
Sure.
So we went, you know, she got the checkup, and they were like, you know, the things we were super prepared in terms of like having hospital bags ready 3 months early. Everything's already laid out. So when it was time to pick up and go, you just literally pick up your bags and go. Go to the hospital.
Head to the hospital.
Yeah, go to the hospital, and they're like, or go to the doctor rather, and they're like, the nurse walks out. So I'm thinking, you know, is there a problem? You know, what's going on? Come back in. The doctor comes in. They're like, okay, so you guys are going to the hospital now. We're like, what? They're like, you're having a baby today. Like, what? They're like, yeah, I guess her water never broke. It just kind of leaked over time, I guess, at a certain point, and there was none left. So it was like, you know, you wait any longer, you're risking brain damage to the baby and things of that nature. So it's like, you got to go right now. So there was no time to prepare. There was no time to go home and get the hospital bags. It was leave the doctor, check into the hospital, have the baby, you know. And they tried to induce for maybe like an hour. They tried it like once, so like an hour. And after that, it was like, all right, yeah, C-section time. So I kind of had this picture in my head thinking that, all right, you have an idea in your head of how it's going to play out.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden it's like, throw all, just like the rest of parenting, throw all that
Throw
out
it
the window.
Yeah.
And went in, and that this was maybe like, got to the hospital by 4, by a little bit after 8 o'clock. I think it might have been 8:18, maybe, I forget. He was out. And I guess, I didn't know this is a thing, but I guess like with C-sections, they hide it from everybody, like in terms like I wasn't supposed to see anything, but when they asked me to come cut the umbilical cord, they forgot to cover things up.
Okay.
So I just happened to turn around and just saw all the guts and everything hanging out. And I guess apparently a lot of dads faint or pass out when they see that. That's why they don't let that's why they don't let the fathers see that.
Yeah. And not only C-section, I'm sure even just giving the birth.
Yeah,
I don't sit in the front. I sat on the back because I see the head come out.
Right.
I just never wanted to look in the front.
Right.
I just feel like I'll never look at it the same.
You won't. But yeah, so I'm just. It's like watching them. You know what? I watch a lot of horror movies.
Sure. I know you're a big horror movie fan.
So it didn't really faze me like that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I just kind of was like, oh, all right, where's the scissors?
But when you cut that umbilical cord, was it weird? Was it? Because I remember,
it was just weird because it was like I'm cutting flesh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And they make it like, do you want to cut the umbilical? They make it like it's normal.
For me, it wasn't even a question. It's like I'm gonna do it.
Of course.
But it was at the same time. I'm just nervous about like not cutting it too long, too short. Like I don't want to cut it the wrong way. Then it looks like he has 2 penises. I remember a kid in grammar school whose umbilical cord got cut the wrong way. And he had come from another country. I guess maybe they just, their standards were different. So his umbilical cord was like, his belly button stuck out. Like it was like 3 or 4 inches.
Damn.
So it was like he had a dick on his stomach. It was really strange.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so I swear to God, when I was cutting his umbilical cord, I thought of that kid. And I was like, let me not mess this up.
Let me do it right.
Yeah.
Have you had a dad moment yet? Like where you're like,
my entire life is one big dad moment. But what are you referring to?
With Solomon, with your son, like had a moment where it's like, I don't know, maybe with a diaper, you got shit on your hand, or were you like, fuck man, or you pissed the pants and
I've cleaned up my fair share of diaper blowouts, but like what I haven't experienced is like I saw. Not that I had a video saved to my phone from like a couple of years back, and I'd forgotten about it. It's like Freddie Gibbs holding his kid on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And as he's talking, the kid just vomits all over his head. Like I haven't had anything like that.
Yeah, I had one on a plane where he threw up all over me.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then we were in the back, and people were bugging. And when you throw up on a plane, it's like almost like a yawn, like a reaction.
Yeah.
And
I never had anything like that. I think he only even peed on me once, but that's because it only took one time for it to happen, for me to develop a technique to make sure it didn't happen again, because it normally would happen during a diaper change.
Yeah.
So I used to like hold him in a way where I had a second diaper in my hand. So as I was taking one diaper off, I'm using the second one as a shield. So in case it ever happened again,
real superhero shit.
Yeah, exactly. Like an Iron Man. It was like
yeah.
deflected back onto him, and then just clean that up. So I only got peed on once. I got lucky in that regard.
So I mean, Solomon is how old? He's 19 months.
Yes, 19 months.
Have you had a moment, yet where it really, like, again, we already spoke about being a father,
right?
Becoming a father, your father, right? But have you had a moment yet where it really sunk in, where about you being a father, like with him,
Probably the first time that I had to take care of him for a stretch by myself.
Feed him.
No, everything, like for like days at a time.
Did you make him? What did you make him? Just baby food or?
Nah, my wife is pretty good. She's OCD, so
yeah, which is a good thing with a kid.
Yeah, so like meals are planned a week in advance, and they're laid out in the refrigerator. And
you had salmon one day.
Yeah, like that's all.
Teriyaki chicken the next.
So. I've had him by myself, I think, for three stretches now. We're actually on the 3rd stretch now. The first time, things were very much laid out. Outfits for the day.
Sure. Socks, underwear.
Yeah, like, and I kind of was like, yo, like, just make sure the food is good. You know, like, because that's kind of your lane. You know, like, in terms of, you know, everything else, like, you know, I'll deal with it. Like, you could be using your time better than making my life easier, you know, or attempting to make my life easier. You know what I mean? Because you're a busy person as well.
Sure.
So do what you got to do, and make sure his food, or like that the breast milk stuff is laid out, you know, and labeled and whatnot. I'll handle everything else. So the first time around, everything was done for me. I just kind of had to fill in the blanks. But even having like the food and the clothing still doesn't prepare you for the fact that, like, yo, you at least, especially at that very early stage, that is your life. Like, that's parenting is a full-time job. Sure. So it's not like, yeah, you just throw them in a playpen and go back to the studio.
Make a beat, you know?
Yeah, like, that's not gonna happen. Like, I remember during that first stretch, Andy, my engineer, who you met earlier, like, I have pictures.
Shout out to Andy.
Yeah, shout out to Andy. I have pictures of, like, me at the console working and him, like, holding the baby and feeding the baby with the bottle. You know, and he's never done anything like that in his life, to my knowledge. You know what I mean? Like, but it was we were doing what we had to do. Second time around, it was a little bit easier because he was a little bit older. This particular stretch, you know, I have Aunt Jenny here with me, and my mom's actually just came through today as well. So, you know, we have the village thing happening, but during those early morning hours and those late night hours, it's still all me for the most part.
Are you
like, you know, like getting him to bed, giving him his bath, reading him his bedtime stories, you know, like, just make sure that he has what he needs to fall asleep comfortably and securely.
And what about, are you a light sleeper, or are you getting to deep sleeping?
I used to be a very deep sleeper when I was younger. As I got older, I became a very light sleeper.
What about being a dad
now,
too?
I was gonna say, but now it's completely different. You know, like, I wake up at the drop of a dime, but only when I hear him.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I slept through my building being on fire once.
Wait, you mean the city?
Yeah, when I used to live in the city.
Fuck!
Dude, I woke up, right? And it was just a strange smell in my apartment, and I'm like, that's weird. And I go to take the elevator, and the elevator's not working. So I'm like, damn, it smells like something's burning. Maybe something must be on fire in the area. And then I'm thinking that the elevator is just down. You know, New York City apartment buildings, the elevators go down.
On?
6.
Okay.
So I go down to the 6 steps, and the smell's getting stronger. I get to the lobby, it's burnt out. And people are looking at me crazy because I'm coming out of the stairwell like, what are you doing in the building? I'm like, I just woke up. And, you know, and then I found out that, like, the building had been on fire. So my point is, that's how deep of a sleeper I was. I slept through a fire. Now, I can still sleep through a lot of things, but when I hear specifically you're trained. So when you hear that cry, you know, or that stirring, you know, you instantly, you know, wake up.
Yeah, you jump up. You
exactly. Know? But there can be other noises, other things happening. I don't notice them at all.
You know, there's a lot of people listening. You know, we have people listening worldwide. Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes. You know, so many people I've had on the show, or I've had involved in things I'm doing. You live a life of craziness, right? But it's normal to you.
Right.
There's a lot of other people too that live similar lives like this, meaning entrepreneurs own businesses. People may own 10 restaurants or whatever.
Right.
How has that been? Because look, from a friend perspective, I know you live a crazy life, but from an outside perspective, I mean, these people. I mean, you produce records for Jay-Z and Beyonce and Kendrick Lamar, and then now you have a kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got restaurants that you have. How the fuck do you balance everything?
I was just about to say the balance is very difficult, because.
And I forgot about traveling.
Yeah, and traveling
and also your wife is an entrepreneur herself, like traveling herself.
Exactly.
So again, we go back to the village. I understand that, but personally
even
for you,
still, just the balance is hard because it's like you got, you know, I've been in situations where it's like I have Jay calling me trying to, like, give me an idea for a record, and I have, you know, meanwhile I'm trying to, like, make his baby food, you know what I mean? Or he doesn't eat baby food anymore, but I'm trying to make him dinner, or I'm trying to, you know, I'm sitting with, you know, he does these, like, home classes because he's way too young for preschool.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here with the teacher while she's going over, you know, stuff with him in his home class, in his homeschooling, and or just even more menial things like I'm trying to talk to Hov and I'm changing his diaper at the same time.
Fatherhood.
Yeah, like it's funny enough. Like I was just dealing with this last night with this Ross record I'm doing right now. Like Ross
sounds crazy.
Ross is thank you. Ross's A&R is texting me and we're going back and forth, and at the same time, like he's trying to call me, but I can't talk to him because I'm trying to get the kid to sleep. But like this record has to go to mastering in the morning. So it's like the record has to go to mastering in the morning, and this is how I make my living and how I provide the roof over my son's head. But I need to get him to sleep so that I can get back to work on this record. Yeah. It's a tough balance. Like you said, there's no manual, and it really is a full-time job. Like the one thing I say a lot, I could never imagine being a single parent with limited
resources.
Even if you were a rich single parent, you know what I mean.
It's tough. Like, you would need a village. You would need, and that's the one thing that I am so used to. How I operate. And your family is similar to mine as far as like if somebody farts, there's 30 people over the house. If somebody gets promoted, there's a cake and 20 people over the house. And I think that's important for kids to see. Let me tell you something. When my daughter, I've been a separated dad since she was 2 years old. It was very hard. I don't suggest it for anybody. I'm not the biggest fan of separated dads, meaning it wasn't the easiest life. Like I'll explain to you. If Solomon is older, he comes down here and he says, "Hey, Dad, let's go throw your bike." Yo, I'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow. When you were separate, I only had those moments with her,
right?
And it may be next weekend,
right?
So
to do it tomorrow, not do it tomorrow. It might be we'll do it next weekend.
Yeah, and then it wasn't the easiest thing, but the point I was making is that I was making a point. I would always bring her around my family because there was always something going on. There was times I was like, I picked her up. I was like, I don't know where to go.
Right.
I was a separated dad.
What to even do?
I mean, I went to the park and stuff like that.
You go to Chuck E. Cheese, but then what?
But then, that's what I'm saying. My family always had, Ma, I remember I called my sister. She's like, oh, yeah, come over. We're going to the Staten Island Zoo. I was like, what? I'll be right there. You know what I mean? I would love some, and I think you have that as well. And I think that's something that people should, I'm not saying some people don't have that, but it doesn't have to only be family. Right.
Well, the point is, I think we're just, folks like you and I are just fortunate to be able to have that. Sure. And shout out to the people who don't and still find a way to make it work. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because I know for a fact, like I said, my parents separated when I was young. My parents, they had 3 kids. There was 3 of us. And if it wasn't for, like, as I get older, I realize how clutch and how key the rest of the family was. Not that I didn't know this growing up, but you look at it from a different perspective when you're older and you're in that parent situation yourself. Because like for example, like my mom, at the time, she was a high school teacher. So, she's out of school at 3, but then she's working until at least 5 or 5:30.
Sure.
So we would have to be in daycare after school care until she got out. Sometimes she couldn't make it, so then my great-grandfather would have to come pick us up. And we would stay at his house or stay at my great-grandparents' house until she got out of work. Then she went, because, she wanted to step her game up, she went and got her master's degree. Mm-hmm. I think it was her master's. So then she was doing school at night after working all day, and then going to school at night. So there were times she might even be able to get to us until 8:30 at night. And that in that case, like my great grandparents were clutch, and so were my great aunt and uncle. Shout out to Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Junior. Like sometimes they would have to split up duty, where like me and my sister would be at my great grandparents' house, and my brother, because he might have had different activities, or whatever, would have to stay, with my aunt and uncle, and then everybody would get us back home at the end of the night when my moms came home. Same with Aunt Jenny. You know what I mean? Like it. My mother definitely would not have been able to pull that off on her own. And even the amount that she did pull off on her own financially, like knowing what those numbers were like and knowing that she was living off of a teacher's salary in the 80s, which was like the worst, one of the worst periods in education. I still don't know how she did it. You know what I mean? Like, without losing the house, and I found out later on that she came close a few times, Whether it was because of taxes and things like that, but somehow she kept it afloat and made it work.
Shit is sad sometimes when you think about it, because people don't really. I think as a kid you don't realize when your parents are struggling.
No, you don't. We used to have pancakes for dinner sometimes.
I mean,
and as a kid, you're thinking that's a treat.
Yeah.
Like, we getting pancakes?
Check this out. As an Italian, and I heard a lot of Spanish folks go through this too, but as Italian, we used to have pasta every night, right? But my mother would make it different, clams and pasta,
right.
Or she would make it like a meat pasta or this. And I was saying to myself, why the fuck are we, I mean, I understand we're Italian, but why are we eating pasta every night? Same with Spanish folks that I grew up with. They were eating rice every night. Maybe they change it around a little bit.
Right.
I didn't realize my father at one point in time was working 3 jobs, it was a tough time for us. And during my teenage years, it was a tough time for me. And it was super hard because I remember all I wanted was a pair of Jordans.
Right.
And $100 for a pair of Jordans at the time.
I remember that.
Literally, my parents didn't say this, but they were like, get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Like, it wouldn't happen. Now I think about how today is like, just one parent isn't even good enough for a kid. Not meaning they're not appreciative of it, but it's like, you got to have a little rotation.
You got to have a rotation.
Like, think about it. Our kids, like if Solomon or Tristan, he goes to school with the same fucking Jordans every day. You know what I mean? It's like,
That's a problem.
Look at this kid. This kid Solomon, yeah, he's cool, but he wears the same fucking
Jordans every day.
Every fucking day.
I remember like in 7th grade when one of my best friends at the time, Jose, had the Jordan 3s. He got them for Christmas that year. We took the rotation was us taking turns wearing them. Me, him, and our other best friend Tommy. It wasn't like we didn't have rotations of sneakers. We rotated taking turns wearing Jose's sneakers. And it's funny that you mentioned them being like $100 or $125 shoes. Like I remember, I never even asked for Jordans because I knew what the answer was already. And I knew the answer because of where my mom could afford us. She took us to shop where she could afford to take us. So we were going to Tommy Can.
Tommy Can, I was just going to say
Buster Brown, whatever, Stride Right, whatever.
Yeah.
You might get a pair of, Adidas that were on clearance. You might get a pair of Spot Builts that were on clearance. But you weren't getting Jordan 3s, And it's funny because I look back at the amount of sneakers that I have now, in the thousands, and I know that at least part of that is me, resulted from me when I first started getting a little bit of money, going back and trying to get all the things that you couldn't get when you were younger, and then that becomes just a habit. And we really think like somebody asked me one time, like, they were asking about the conversation was about sneakers and hip hop culture in general, and why are sneakers such a big deal in hip hop culture or in streetwear in general. And I really didn't have an answer, but I really tried to like sit back and think about it. Like you can trace the history and all that stuff, but it's like, all right, when you get back to the very beginning, why? And that's when I really realized, like for me, it really started from. I remember when I got my first check for $5,000 or $4,800. Like,
was that working a regular job or?
No, it was like for the first beat that I had ever did. Like, this is kind of where the whole, that old thing I used to have where people used to be like, oh, all Just does is play video games all day.
Yeah.
Where that started from was because when I got my first check, I did 2 things. I went to Transit, which was right across the street from the cutting room, where I had my day job at. And I walked into the sneaker store, or I walked downstairs where the sneakers were, and I did the whole. I need these. They're like, which ones? I'm like, all of them. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I want one of each of these in 10.5. I pretty much like bought like half the wall, and then I went to there was a video game spot. Funny enough, which is actually how I met Andy. He used to work there. It was in the East Village, also near the cutting room. And I went in there and bought every system that I wanted as a kid that we couldn't afford. Like my mom's got us a Genesis, but that was it. Yeah. So I went in there and I bought the ColecoVision, the Intellivision, the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, anything that I wanted back then that I couldn't get, I bought it all. And I realized through this conversation that we were having about sneakers and hip hop and streetwear that a lot of what people know me for in terms of what my interests are, what they think my main interests are, really are habits that develop from me just going out and buying things that my family couldn't afford. And I'm curious as to how this will play out with Solomon, because obviously
Yeah.
He will have the fortune and blessing of growing up in a slightly different in a different tax bracket. But I still want to instill the same values that were instilled in me as a kid. But I worry because, like, this kid's going to grow up in a house that has an 8-seat movie theater. You know? He's going to grow up with being able to ask his dad, you know, can he borrow the keys to the Lamborghini? So the challenge, or what I'm trying to figure out, is how do you, and it's not impossible. I just don't. You know, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and I know rich kids that are. I'm not rich. I do all right.
No, I know what you mean.
I know rich kids who are grounded, and I know rich kids who are insane maniacs, because and both of them are the way they are pretty much because of how they grew up. So I got to figure out that balance of how you know, make them understand. All right, yes, we have these nice material things, but you also have to understand the value of a dollar. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy for me to relay that to somebody if they were growing up the same way that I grew up. So I think the challenge for me is going to be, how do I relay that using the methods or the way that I was taught when he's not growing up like that. That's something that I think about a lot. You know, like he doesn't have trust funds, but he has accounts that are set up, you know,
Sure.
for him. And so when he gets to, but I can't do the thing where it's like, all right, you turned 18, you know, here's $500,000. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's, all right, you turned 18? You graduated school. If you haven't graduated school, do you have these other things in play? You know what I mean? Like, I have to figure out what the milestones are for him to get these, you know, to get these rewards. Because, like, you know, some people just say, all right, you turn 18, you get this money. That rarely ends well. I can't use the school thing because I didn't finish school.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I can't put that on him.
And who knows where we'll be with school.
Yeah, but I'm going to say, but also a lot of people go to school and they're still idiots.
Sure.
You know,
or don't know what they want to do.
Yeah, I know idiots that have graduated from Yale. So that's not a good benchmark either. So I had to think about it in terms of milestones, you know, and, you know, things that aren't quantifiable but somehow still tangible, to say, okay, you know, you have this in play. I want to support. I would like him to build his own thing the same way that we did, and provide him with some resources to do that. But it has to be based on something. Like, and it has to be something that may take place when I'm not here. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm still here, then I can just look at what he has going on and say, okay, you know what, you've earned this $50,000, you know, that I've been holding on to.
Sure.
You've earned this $100,000 that I've been holding on to for you. If I'm not here, that's somebody else's job. I got to put that in somebody else's hands.
You know, it's special that you think about that, because think about it. Most people just, you know, could be snobby about it. You know, it is what it is. And,
Right.
you know, the fact that you're thinking about it, like, even somebody like me, like, I'm not bracketly there, but I understand what the fuck you're saying. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
It's like, it's something to think about. It's not just something just like, oh, you got money here, go take the Lamborghini here, this, and live life. You got to be strategic about it, because you also want to make sure people don't get very super spoiled. You know what I mean? Like, the way you're putting it is like, you know, it's smart, and it's good to hear. I think people, you know, could learn a lot from that too.
Yeah, you know, like I said, I'm just happy that I'm fortunate enough to have that be an issue. You know what I mean? And I think that's also part of the benefit of having a child at, you know, having my first child at a bit of an older age. You approach it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You know.
Did you do that on purpose, or you just life just was busy?
Both.
Meaning, yeah.
You know what I mean? I wasn't gonna just have random kids. You know,
and it's crazy because
my life just worked out the way that it did.
Think about how crazy your life was.
Yeah.
10, 15
well,
years
I think
ago.
about that, like, you know,
could have happened.
Like, what would I have done if I'd had a kid, like, in that? I mean, don't get me wrong. We would have made it work, and it would have been, you know, it would have been fine. But if I'd had a kid, say, like, in the mid 2000s, like, I do wonder what that would have been like, because I was pretty much had the same values, but I was a different person. And at the same time, I was also part of the reason I was so crazy back then in terms of running around. Not that I'm not crazy now, but I was moving and shaking so much because I was trying to establish my career.
Sure.
You know, and get my foothold, from the early 2000s all the way to like the end of the around 2010 ish. I would say like I was probably in scramble mode from like 99 to 2003 or 4-ish. I was in heavy scramble mode, and then from there it was kind of ride out, make the right choices, and get on the right records. So I didn't have to work as much. I was working smarter instead of harder. But even still, that's when you start to work smarter, that actually makes you a little bit busier because you're doing less of the wrong things, but you're doing a lot more of the right things. Yeah. So that was I can't imagine what that would have been like. Had I did have a kid back then, I probably would not have been able to afford create some of the opportunities that I created for myself. Sure. I know some producers whose lives, kind of got, I don't want to say their lives got ruined because they had kids, because kids are the greatest blessing, but their careers got ruined because they had kids and they didn't manage having the kids the right way. Copy. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like, not that you can't have kids and have a career, but if you can't handle the change that comes along with that, or if you have kids under bad circumstances, you know what I mean? Like not the right woman, not the right relationship.
Things could get crazy.
I would what I would say, let me rephrase that. Producers whose careers never took off or tanked because they had kids, didn't know how to manage having kids because they had them with the wrong woman or with the wrong partner. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. I think the partnership is really, at any age, is really what makes it, what makes it work. It's especially what makes it work in this case.
As we wind this down, you heard me always say presence over presence.
Definitely.
And I always say that the greatest gift you could ever give your kid is your presence. Just being there. Yeah. I always use this for example too. But me and Combat, and rest in peace, we sat down with Little Boozy, and he just came home, and I was like, talking about his kids because he has a lot of kids, and he's like, my kids had iPads, they had Apple Watches, and I was like, but they didn't have you. And when I said that, he was like, yeah, you're right. For a second, sometimes when we live in a world where it's like you got money, you just say, like, they good.
You give the kids everything they want materially, but you're not giving them much personally. And going back to something that we briefly touched on, most of the kids that I knew who grew up, like, who had, not my friend Jose that we spoke about, but other kids from around that same era, who did have the Jordan rotation, who didn't know anything about DJing, but had the freshest turntables and had the Jazzy Jeff mixer and every record that was hot at the time, at a very young age. Most of those kids who had a lot materially ended up not having much in life later on. And I'm actually just thinking about that now as we're having this conversation. I never really thought about it from this perspective, but almost every kid that I knew, not rich, because I didn't grow up around with any. I didn't know any rich people growing up, but the kids whose parents just showered their kids with stuff, most of them did not do too well for themselves when they became adults or even adolescents. Really, a lot of them were the first ones to get in trouble, and a lot of times in life, not always, but a lot of times you get in trouble at an early age. It puts you on a certain path.
Yeah, sure. You make a choice that could fuck you up 10 years from now. You know, it's crazy. That's why you always got to be on point, man. Keep your head on a swivel, and really be smart. Like we said, with presence over presence, and obviously, sometimes you could have presence with presence. I always tell people this because some people are like, you got to buy a gift. I'm like, okay, so you buy a football, but then go outside and play with them. You know what
exactly.
I mean? Like,
you want to have him outside playing catch by himself.
Yeah. So I think that's important. If your son grew up and he wanted to be a producer, would you support that?
Yeah, he can.
No, some people say they don't want their.
Nah, he can do whatever it is that he wants as long as he's good at it. As long as he's good at it, and he's happy and he's healthy. You know what I mean?
Are you gonna put a couple of bars on his song?
Yeah, but
people remember it just could have become an artist. You know what I mean? I mean you are an artist, but meaning
not in that sense though. Yeah, that was actually the initial goal. Like me and my brother, you gotta remember, like in the era that I grew up in, you didn't do one thing, you did all of it. So you wrote graffiti, you danced,
Sure, break dance,
you DJ'd, you rhymed, you did everything, or as much of it as you could. So as we got older, we realized, I wrote good rhymes. I didn't rap well.
Mm-hmm.
We both, I was a good DJ and a good producer. His production was okay. Mine was better, but his rhymes were better.
Mm-hmm.
Our DJing over the years kind of became equal. He's definitely now a better DJ than I am, for sure. It started out with, it wasn't just I'm going to be an artist. It was, this is hip hop. This is what we do.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I don't want to get off on that tangent too much because the game is so different now. But if that's what he wanted to do, I'd have no problem with it. Like I said, I'd want him to be good at it. I want him, to be honest with himself because I want to be honest with him about it. But as long, ultimately, whatever he wants to do, as long as he's happy and healthy, I want to nurture that. That's what I already do. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, of course.
He, if you go up to his little playroom area, he has an 808 and a 303 in there. So some people, they're like, oh, you got him,
For those who listening who don't know or watching.
The 808 is a legendary drum machine. The 303 is a legendary
this kid's already set to go.
Machine. But what's bugged out is people see that and they think it's the typical, the dad's a football player, so he buys his kid a football.
Exactly.
It's like, no, you don't know. The first time, in this very room, I don't know if you ever saw this video, in this very room, those Rain turntables that are over there, when Rain first sent them to me, I had them set up on the floor because I didn't have a stand for them yet. His first time ever seeing turntables, he crawled over to them. He wasn't even walking yet. He was 6 months old. He crawled over to them. Now, mind you, the mixer has a zillion lights on it.
Sure.
Touch screens. The turntables have a bunch of lights on them. The first thing he did was go to the platter and start spinning the platter. So,
classic.
And I'm just sitting there like, people are like, oh, he learned it from watching you. I'm like, watching me where?
Yeah, he's in the club with you?
Yeah, you think he's in a club? Or like, you think I'm GQ from Juice, like practicing in my house? Where would he have ever seen this? So that kind of, it kind of bugged me out. And then, we have the record room upstairs that has a turntable on the wall. And he would love to just sit there and watch the record spin as I would play them. And the first time that, he came into the studio, the first thing he did was he dove out of his mom's arms and right towards the turntable. Towards the keyboard, and started trying to play the keys. And actually, I'm jumping ahead. The very first thing we saw when he was maybe 3 or 4 months old, my Aunt Ginny sent me a video of him playing the piano on an iPad. Not really playing, but he's banging on the keys.
Banging.
But the ill thing was that he was only touching the keys. He wasn't touching anything else that was on the screen. So I'm like, wow, that's kind of bugged out that he even knows what part of the screen to hit to get the sound. Then he did the thing with the turntables. Then he started watching the record spin on the wall. And then he did the thing in the studio where he was, every time he would come in, he would dive for the for the keyboard. And whenever we would pull him away from it, we let him play with it for a little while. Then when we would pull him away because it was time to leave, he would start crying, like this kid doesn't really have tantrums. He would have full-on meltdowns. So I remembered at one point, because he kept having these meltdowns, that Roland makes these miniature 808s and 303s and these other little modules, and they're battery powered and they have speakers in them, but they're full-on replications of the original machines, just in a smaller package. So I'm like, wait a minute, they're small, they have speakers, and they have batteries, and Roland had sent me a bunch of them. So I sent I remember that I had them, in a closet in the studio, pulled them out of the closet, and on his first birthday, I set them up for him in the family room upstairs. I'm gonna send you the video so you can add it to this.
This video. Yeah.
Because I don't think I'd ever seen that much joy in his face up until that point. This was on his This was right before his first birthday. I'd never seen him get that with that much joy in his face off of a toy or something like that. Like he's sitting there clapping, smiling, laughing. So that's what he was gravitating towards at that time. He used to like to bang on he had like a fake plastic drum set. This drum set back here that's behind us, that's his. That's not mine. Like as much as he was banging on the plastic drum set, I said, all right, got Questlove sent over the kid's pocket kit. He's a little too small for it still, but whenever he comes down here, the first thing he does is he goes for the sticks and he bangs on it. So my thing is like,
that's Questlove. Questlove has his own drum sets.
Yeah, Ludwig. He partnered with Ludwig.
Okay,
so
nice.
it's a drum set specifically designed for I think kids starting from 8 years old and up. Yeah, so it's like again, whenever he gravitates towards, that's what we support him with and surround him with, and nurture.
Listen, I wanted to, for those of you who know you, obviously I said as a producer and a bunch of other things, a gamer, lowhead, breakdancer. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do. I wanted to really focus on doing something. I want to kick this off on parenting, on how important it is and how special it is, and really, to be honest with you, the reason why I wanted to have this conversation, I mean, I have an episode way back with you if people want to learn more that don't know about you, and they could just go Google or watch YouTube.
Part of the reason why I scaled back on press so much is because at a certain point, I've been doing this for almost, next year will be 20 years.
God damn.
No, I'm sorry, this year makes 20 years.
Okay.
If one more person asks me, so how did you get started?
Yeah.
I've been doing press for 20 years.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
and it's mostly in the internet era. If you want to know how I got started or anything else about my career and whatnot, it's all Googleable.
Sure.
So, or
watchable.
Yeah, or watchable. So I prefer,
listenable.
Yeah, and unless we're talking about something like this that actually means something to me, and it's something that I haven't spoken about 10 million times, I'm not really interested.
Of course, I want people. That's the thing too. I want people who are watching this, who are listening to this. I want fellow father, what it is. We need more of each other. That's
Indeed.
the thing. Meaning you should be able to call me yo Pete. Say you have a daughter.
Right.
You should be yo.
I'm gonna add you onto this group chat we got. My homie Matt, Vic, my homie Moya. Moya used to work at Baseline back when we were young. He's got a website called Swagger Dad now, and he makes clothes that match for the kids and the dads and whatnot. But we have a little dad support group on iMessage. I'm gonna add you to it.
Yeah, I want to get I want people to be more involved and understand parenting and what goes about
especially from our perspective in our generation.
Of course,
for sure.
And just being there, being there for your kids. Just
my man's
blessings, my brother.
Always love, B.
Right.